You know that feeling when you're so close to something you've worked for your entire career, and then it just gets snatched away? That's exactly what happened to me. But here's the thing about being underestimated. Sometimes it comes back to bite them in ways they never saw coming. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Jessica, and I'm 32 years old. 3 years ago, I was drowning in credit card debt. We're talking about $43,000 spread across 6 different cards. I was living in a studio apartment that was basically a glorified closet, paying $1,800 a month for 300 square feet in a building where the elevator worked maybe half the time. I was working at a telecommunications company called Connect Corp, making $38,000 a year, and honestly, I felt like I was slowly suffocating. Every morning, I'd wake up to the same routine. Check my bank account, see the overdraft fees piling up, then drag myself to a job where my manager, this guy named Rick, would assign me the worst leads and act like he was doing me a favor. I remember one particularly brutal day when I'd been working on a potential client for 3 weeks. A small law firm that needed a phone system upgrade. I'd done all the research, built the relationship, scheduled the presentation, and then Rick swooped in at the last minute and took the meeting himself. Said I wasn't senior enough to handle it alone. I watched from my cubicle as he walked into that conference room and closed my deal. My deal. He got the commission, the recognition, everything. And when I confronted him about it, he just shrugged and said, "That's business, kid. Maybe next time." That night, I went home to my tiny apartment, sat on my second-hand couch, and cried. Not just a few tears. I'm talking about ugly, soul-crushing sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. I was 29 years old, drowning in debt, stuck in a dead-end job, and I couldn't see a way out. I'd been in sales for 7 years, and I had nothing to show for it except a growing pile of rejection letters and maxed-out credit cards. But you know what? Sometimes rock bottom is exactly where you need to be to start climbing. I had this burning desire to prove myself in sales to show everyone, including myself, that I was capable of more than they thought. Every door I knocked on seemed to slam shut before I could even get my foot in, but I kept knocking anyway. That's when I heard about Morrison Tech Solutions. They were this mid-sized software company that specialized in enterprise solutions, and they were looking for a new sales director. I found the job posting on LinkedIn at 2 in the morning, scrolling through opportunities while I couldn't sleep because I was stressed about my visa bill that was due the next day. The position seemed way above my pay grade. They wanted someone with extensive enterprise sales experience and proven track record with 7-figure deals. I had neither. But I figured what the hell. Worst they could say was no, right? And honestly, I was so desperate for change that I would have applied to sell ice to penguins if it meant getting out of Connect Corp. I spent 3 days crafting my cover letter, researching Morrison Tech's client base, and practicing my pitch in the mirror. I even borrowed a decent suit from my sister. This navy blue number that made me look like I actually belonged in a corporate boardroom. The interview process was brutal. 3 rounds, each one more intimidating than the last. The first round was with HR, this pleasant woman named Linda who asked all the standard questions about my background and why I wanted to work there. I managed to get through that one without embarrassing myself too badly. The second round was where things got serious. I met with the VP of Sales, Patricia Mills, and her assistant director, a guy named Tom Rodriguez. Patricia was this sharp-dressed woman in her 50s who had this way of looking at you like she could see right through any bullshit you might try to sell her. She fired off questions like she was conducting a military interrogation. "Tell me about the largest deal you've ever closed," she said, leaning back in her chair. I swallowed hard. Well, it was a phone system upgrade for a regional accounting firm. The total value was about $85,000. Patricia exchanged a look with Tom that I couldn't quite read. "And how long did that take you to close?" "For months," I said, trying to sound confident. 4 months for $85,000? Tom asked, raising an eyebrow. That seems like a long sales cycle for a relatively small deal. I felt my cheeks getting hot. The client had some budget constraints, and I had to work with multiple decision-makers. Patricia said, making notes on her pad. "And what was your total sales volume last year?" $2.3 million, I said, which sounded impressive until you realized most of their sales directors probably did that in a quarter. But somehow, I made it to the 3rd round. The final interview was with the CEO, Marcus Wheeler, and it was honestly terrifying. Marcus was this old-school businessman in his 60s, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than talking to a nobody from a small telecom company. He had this corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and everything about it screamed success and power. "Jessica," he said, not bothering to look up from the folder he was reading, "why should I hire someone with your limited experience for a position that requires handling million-dollar deals?" It was a fair question, and I could have given him some corporate speak answer about being hungry and motivated. Instead, I told him the truth. "Because I'm tired of being underestimated," I said. "I'm tired of working for people who don't believe in me and getting scraps while watching mediocre people succeed because they had better connections or went to the right schools. I know I can do this job, and I know I can do it well. You just have to give me the chance to prove it." Marcus finally looked up from the folder. He studied my face for what felt like an eternity, then closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "The salary is $75,000 base plus commission," he said. "Commission structure is 5% of the first million, 7% of the next million, and 10% of anything above 2 million. Standard benefits package. Can you start Monday?" I nearly fell out of my chair. "You mean I got the job?" "Don't make me regret it," Marcus said, already reaching for his phone to take another call. I floated out of that building. $75,000 was more than double what I was making at Connect Corp. The salary alone would let me get out of that studio apartment and into a real one-bedroom place. More importantly, it was my shot. My chance to prove that I belonged in the big leagues. My first year was rough. I mean really rough. I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose every single day. The enterprise software world was completely different from anything I'd experienced at Connect Corp. Instead of convincing small businesses to upgrade their phone systems, I was dealing with Fortune 500 companies that had complex IT infrastructures and procurement processes that could take months to navigate. I remember my first client meeting. It was with a regional bank that was looking to upgrade their data management system. I walked into this gleaming conference room with marble floors and a table that probably cost more than my car, and I was facing 8 executives in expensive suits who all looked like they'd rather be getting root canals. "Ms. Martinez," the CTO said, glancing at his watch, "we have 15 minutes. Tell us why we should choose Morrison Tech over our current vendor." I launched into my presentation, talking about our software's features and benefits, but I could see their eyes glazing over. These people had heard it all before. They didn't care about technical specifications or implementation timelines. They wanted to know one thing. How was this going to make their lives easier? Halfway through my pitch, the CFO interrupted me. "This is all very interesting, but our current system works fine. Why should we spend $2 million to fix something that isn't broken?" I felt my stomach drop. $2 million? I'd been thinking this was maybe a $500,000 deal. But I tried to stay calm and pivot to talking about cost savings and efficiency improvements. It didn't work. The meeting ended with polite handshakes and promises to be in touch, which in business speak means, "Don't call us, we'll call you." They went with their existing vendor. I'd spent 3 weeks preparing for that meeting, and I walked away with nothing. This pattern repeated itself over and over during those first few months. I'd identify a prospect, spend weeks researching their needs, schedule meetings, give presentations, and then watch them choose someone else. Usually someone with more experience, or a bigger company, or a better relationship with the decision-makers. I was working 18-hour days just to keep my head above water. I'd get to the office at 7 in the morning and leave at midnight, trying to learn everything I could about our products, our competitors, and our market. I took online courses in enterprise software sales, read every book I could find on B2B selling, and attended networking events where I felt completely out of my depth. The financial pressure was crushing. My base salary was enough to cover my basic expenses, but I wasn't making any commission because I wasn't closing deals. I had to put my credit card payments on autopay just to avoid late fees, and I was living on ramen noodles and whatever free food I could find at industry events. There were nights when I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe Rick was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this level of sales. Maybe I should have stayed at Connect Corp and been grateful for the steady paycheck. But then I'd think about that morning routine, checking my bank account, seeing the overdraft fees, watching other people succeed while I struggled. I'd remember how it felt to have my deals stolen, to be treated like I didn't matter, to feel invisible in my own career. And I'd get angry. Not the destructive kind of angry, but the motivating kind. The kind that makes you work harder, study longer, and refuse to give up. The breakthrough came in month 8. I was working on a deal with a logistics company that needed to upgrade their inventory management system. It was a complex sale involving multiple stakeholders, and I'd been nurturing this relationship for 3 months. The CEO, the CTO, the head of operations, and the procurement director all had different priorities and concerns. Instead of trying to convince them all with the same pitch, I created customized presentations for each stakeholder. For the CEO, I focused on ROI and competitive advantage. For the CTO, I dove deep into technical specifications and integration capabilities. For the head of operations, I emphasized workflow improvements and user experience. For procurement, I built detailed cost-benefit analyses and implementation timelines. It worked. They signed a contract for $1.4 million, and I earned my first real commission check, $98,000. I remember opening that envelope and just staring at the number. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. I called my mom immediately. "Mom, I did it," I said, my voice shaking. "I actually did it." "Did what, honey?" "I closed $1 million deal. I'm officially a real salesperson now." She started crying, and then I started crying, and we just sat there on the phone, 2 grown women sobbing with happiness because her daughter had finally proved she could succeed in a world that had tried to keep her down. That deal changed everything. Not just financially but psychologically. I'd proven to myself that I could compete at this level. I belonged in those mobile conference rooms. I could handle the pressure, navigate the complex sales cycles, and close the big deals. By the end of my first year, I'd managed to bring in about $2.8 million in sales. Not bad for a rookie, but nothing that would make headlines. My total commission for the year was around $190,000, which felt like winning the lottery after years of struggling financially. But success in sales is like a drug. Once you taste it, you want more. And more. And more. I wasn't content to be just another sales director hitting quota. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be the one everyone talked about when they discussed top performers. I wanted to prove that the girl from the studio apartment could play with the big boys and win. My second year, I started hunting bigger fish. I wasn't content with the small to medium-sized clients anymore. I wanted the whales, the deals that would change everything. I began targeting companies with revenues over $1 billion, organizations that had the budgets and the need for truly transformative technology solutions. That's when I first heard about Pinnacle Industries. Pinnacle was this massive manufacturing conglomerate with operations in 12 countries. They produced everything from automotive components to aerospace parts, and their annual revenue was something like $47 billion. They were looking to overhaul their entire IT infrastructure, and rumor had it they were willing to spend serious money to get it done right. We're talking about a deal that could be worth anywhere from $30 to $60 million. It was the kind of opportunity that comes around maybe once in a career. The problem was, everyone knew about Pinnacle. Every major software company in the industry was chasing this deal. IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, SAP. All the heavy hitters were already in the mix. What chance did a mid-sized company like Morrison Tech have against those giants? But I've never been one to back down from a challenge. I spent the next 2 months becoming an expert on Pinnacle Industries. I read their annual reports, studied their acquisition history, analyzed their competitive landscape. I learned about their supply chain challenges, their international expansion plans, their regulatory compliance issues. I could tell you the name of their head of procurement in Germany, their market share in the Asian automotive sector, and their projected growth rates for the next 5 years. I discovered that Pinnacle had been burned by large software implementations before. 3 years earlier, they'd paid IBM $28 million for a new ERP system that was supposed to streamline their global operations. The project went 2 years over schedule, cost 40% more than projected, and still had major functionality gaps when it was finally launched. This was my angle. While the big companies were focused on impressing Pinnacle with their size and resources, I was going to position Morrison Tech as the nimble, responsive partner that would actually deliver on their promises. The challenge was getting in the door. Pinnacle wasn't taking meetings with every vendor who called. They had a formal RFP process, and they were only considering companies that were specifically invited to participate. I needed an inside connection, and I had no idea how to get one. I started attending every industry conference and networking event I could find. I joined professional associations, volunteered for committee work, and basically became a fixture at any gathering where enterprise software was discussed. I was spending my own money on conference fees, travel, and hotel rooms, but I saw it as an investment in my future. The breakthrough came at a tech conference in Chicago. I was standing in line for coffee, and let me tell you, conference coffee is always terrible, but you drink it anyway because you need the caffeine, when I overheard two guys in front of me talking about data integration challenges. The problem is we have 12 different systems across our facilities. One of them was saying, none of them talk to each other, and getting real-time visibility into our operations is basically impossible. The other guy nodded. We've been limping along with spreadsheets and manual reports, but it's not sustainable. We need something that can handle the complexity of our operations without requiring a PhD in computer science to use. My ears perked up. This sounded exactly like the kind of problem Morrison Tech was designed to solve. I casually moved closer to their conversation, pretending to check my phone while I listened. The worst part is the reporting, the first guy continued. My CEO wants to know our production numbers in real time, but I'm getting data from 3 different time zones, in 5 different formats, and half of it is manually entered. By the time I compile a report, it's already obsolete. I couldn't help myself. Excuse me, I said, turning toward them. I couldn't help but overhear. That sounds like a nightmare to manage. The first guy, who was tall and Asian with graying hair, smiled ruefully. Tell me about it. I've been dealing with this mess for 3 years, and it just keeps getting worse as we expand internationally. I'm Jessica Martinez, I said, extending my hand. I work in enterprise software solutions. What industry are you in? Robert Kim, he said, shaking my hand. I'm the CTO at Pinnacle Industries. And this is my colleague, Michael Torres, our head of IT operations. I almost choked on my coffee. Robert Kim? The CTO of Pinnacle Industries? The guy I'd been trying to get a meeting with for months was standing right in front of me, complaining about exactly the problems my company could solve? Pinnacle Industries, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. The manufacturing conglomerate. You guys have quite a reputation in the industry. Unfortunately, most of it lately has been about our IT challenges, Michael said with a laugh. We're great at making things, but we're terrible at managing data about the things we make. For the next 20 minutes I just listened. I didn't pitch Morrison Tech, didn't try to sell them anything, didn't even mention that I was in sales. I just asked thoughtful questions about their challenges, their goals, and their frustrations with their current systems. The thing is, Robert said, we've been down this road before. We hired IBM to fix our problems, and they made them worse. Now every time someone says they have a solution, I'm skeptical. That's smart, I said. IBM's great at a lot of things, but they're not great at understanding the unique challenges of manufacturing operations. They try to force every client into the same box, whether it fits or not. Robert's eyes lit up. Exactly. They kept telling us we needed to change our processes to fit their software, instead of adapting their software to fit our processes. Right, I said. And you can't just tell a factory in Germany to completely change how they've been doing things for 20 years because some consultant from New York thinks there's a better way. You get it, Michael said. Most software people don't understand manufacturing. They think it's just about moving data around, but it's really about understanding how things are made. We talked for another few minutes, and I could see the wheels turning in Robert's head. He was frustrated with their current situation, burned by their previous experience, and looking for someone who actually understood their business. I didn't pitch him right there in the coffee line. That would have been too obvious and would have destroyed the rapport we'd built. Instead, I just listened, empathized, and made sure he had my business card when we parted ways. If you're ever looking for fresh perspectives on enterprise software, I said, I'd be happy to grab coffee and talk through some ideas. No sales pitch, just industry insights. I might take you up on that, Robert said, tucking my card into his wallet. It's refreshing to meet someone who actually understands what we're dealing with. 3 weeks later he called. Jessica, this is Robert Kim from Pinnacle Industries. We met at the Chicago conference a few weeks ago. Robert, of course. How are you doing? Well, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I'm wondering if you might have some time to continue it. Maybe we could set up a meeting. I tried to keep the excitement out of my voice. I'd be happy to. What did you have in mind? Why don't you come to Dallas? I'd like you to meet my team and see our facilities. Maybe you can help us think through some of these challenges we discussed. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Dallas. The Pinnacle headquarters was this massive complex that looked more like a small city than a corporate office. Glass towers connected by skywalks, perfectly manicured landscaping, and a parking garage that had more floors than most buildings. Robert met me in the lobby, and the first thing he said was, "Welcome to the chaos." He took me on a tour of their operations center, and I could immediately see what he meant. They had workstations with multiple monitors displaying data from different systems, but none of it was integrated. Employees were literally taking information from one screen, manually entering it into another system, and then cross-referencing it with printed reports to make sure everything matched. "This is insane," I said, watching a data analyst juggle 3 different applications just to generate a single report. "Tell me about it," Robert said. "We have brilliant people doing mind-numbing work because our systems can't talk to each other." The meeting with his team was eye-opening. There were 12 people in the room, IT directors, operations managers, and data analysts, and every single one of them had horror stories about their current systems. They were spending millions of dollars on software that was supposed to make their lives easier, but instead was creating more work and more frustration. "The worst part," said Jennifer Walsh, their head of operations, "is that we can't get real-time visibility into our supply chain. When a customer calls asking about their order, we have to tell them we'll call them back because it takes us 2 hours to compile the information from our different systems. And don't even get me started on financial reporting," added Frank Castellano, their CFO. "We're a $47 billion company, and it takes us 3 weeks to close our books every month because everything has to be manually reconciled." I spent the next 4 hours listening to their challenges, asking questions, and taking notes. I didn't pitch Morrison Tech once. I just focused on understanding their pain points and their vision for what a solution would look like. At the end of the meeting, Robert walked me to the lobby. "Jessica, I have to ask, do you think Morrison Tech can actually solve these problems?" "Honestly, I think we can solve most of them. But more importantly, I think we can implement a solution that actually works for your business instead of forcing your business to work around the software." "What would that look like?" "Give me 2 weeks to put together a proposal. I want to show you exactly how we'd approach your challenges, what the implementation timeline would look like, and how we'd measure success." Robert smiled. "I'll be waiting." The next 2 weeks were a blur of 18-hour days. I worked with our technical team to design a custom solution that would integrate all of Pinnacle's systems. I created detailed project plans, risk assessments, and ROI calculations. I even flew to our headquarters in Austin to present the opportunity to our development team and get their buy-in for the customizations we'd need to make. The proposal I delivered was 87 pages long. It covered everything from technical architecture to change management strategies. I addressed every concern that had been raised in our initial meeting and provided detailed solutions for each of their pain points. The presentation went incredibly well. Robert's team asked tough questions, and I was able to answer every single one. They were impressed by the level of detail and the fact that we'd clearly listened to their needs instead of just trying to sell them our standard package. But then Robert dropped the bombshell. "Jessica, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about the software. It's about the relationship. We're betting our entire IT infrastructure on this decision, and we've been burned before." He explained that Pinnacle had been disappointed by vendors who would wine and dine them during the sales process, then hand them off to junior account managers once the contract was signed. They weren't going to let that happen again. "We want a key person clause in the contract," Robert said. "You have to be our primary point of contact for the first 3 years of the implementation. If you leave Morrison Tech or get reassigned, we have the option to void the entire contract." I felt my heart skip a beat. A key person clause? That was serious stuff. It meant that Morrison Tech couldn't just shuffle me around or replace me with someone cheaper. It meant that I would have real leverage, real job security, and real responsibility. That's a big commitment," I said. "It's a $50 million commitment," Robert replied. "We need to know that the person who sold us this solution is going to be the person who delivers it." I nodded slowly. "I understand. Let me take this back to my team and see what we can do." The conversation with Marcus Wheeler and Patricia Mills was tense. Key person clauses were risky for companies because they gave individual employees too much power. If I decided to leave Morrison Tech, Pinnacle could walk away with their $50 million contract, leaving the company high and dry. "It's too much risk," Patricia said. What if Jessica gets a better offer somewhere else? What if she decides to start her own company? We'd be completely exposed. But without the key person clause, we don't get the deal, I pointed out. Robert was very clear about this. It's non-negotiable from their perspective. Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering. Jessica, are you committed to seeing this through? 3 years is a long time. I'm committed, I said. This is the opportunity I've been working toward my entire career. I'm not going anywhere. After 2 days of internal discussions, they reluctantly agreed to the key person clause. The contract was finalized, and we scheduled the signing ceremony for the following week. The day we signed the contract was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I was sitting in this massive conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Dallas, watching Robert Kim put his signature on a $50 million deal that I had closed. $50 million. The largest deal in Morrison Tech's history. And I was the one who had made it happen. According to the commission structure, I was looking at a payout of around $450,000. My calculator said $450,000 exactly, but I kept double-checking the math because I couldn't believe it was real. That was more money than I'd made in my entire career combined. It was enough to pay off my credit cards, buy a house, and still have money left over for a decent car. More than that, it was validation. Proof that I belonged in this world. Proof that the girl from the studio apartment could play with the big boys and win. I flew back to Austin feeling like I was on top of the world. I'd closed the biggest deal in company history, secured my position with a key person clause, and was about to receive a commission check that would change my life forever. That's when everything went sideways. 2 weeks after the contract was signed, Patricia Mills called me into her office. She had this weird expression on her face, like she was trying to look sympathetic but couldn't quite pull it off. Jessica, we need to talk about your commission, she said. I sat down, expecting maybe some paperwork issues or questions about the payment schedule. Instead, she handed me a document that made my blood run cold. We're implementing a new commission structure, she said, like she was announcing what we were having for lunch. Effective immediately, all commissions are capped at $200,000. I just sat there, staring at the paper, trying to process what I was hearing. I'm sorry, what? The board feels that individual commission payments above $200,000 create unhealthy incentives and compensation disparities within the company, she continued, reading from what was obviously a prepared statement. But the contract was signed under the old structure, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I earned $450,000. The new policy is retroactive to the beginning of the year, Patricia replied. I'm sorry, Jessica. I know this is disappointing, but it's a business decision. Disappointing? I had just brought in the largest deal in company history, and they were cutting my commission by more than half. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This is illegal, I said, standing up. You can't just change the commission structure after the fact. Actually, if you check your employment contract, you'll see that commission structures are subject to change at the company's discretion, Patricia said, her voice getting colder. This is final, Jessica. I walked out of that office in a daze. $450,000, reduced to $200,000. They were literally stealing $250,000 from me, and there was nothing I could do about it. Or so I thought. I spent the next week alternating between rage and despair. I consulted with 3 different employment lawyers, but they all told me the same thing. My contract was ironclad. Morrison Tech had the right to change commission structures, and there was no legal recourse. I started updating my resume, reaching out to headhunters, and basically preparing to leave Morrison Tech. If they wanted to screw me over, fine. But I wasn't going to stick around and let them do it again. That's when I remembered the key person clause. I pulled out my copy of the Pinnacle contract and read it carefully. The language was crystal clear. Morrison Tech Solutions agrees that Jessica Martinez will serve as the primary account director for this contract for a period of 3 years from the effective date. Should Ms. Martinez leave her position or be reassigned, Pinnacle Industries reserves the right to terminate this agreement with 30 days written notice. Suddenly, I had leverage. Real leverage. I called Robert Kim and asked if we could meet for coffee. He agreed, probably thinking I wanted to discuss implementation details or project timelines. Instead, I told him exactly what had happened. They did what? He said, his voice rising loud enough that people at nearby tables turned to look. They changed the commission structure after the contract was signed, I repeated. They're paying me less than half of what I earned. Robert's face went through about 5 different expressions before settling on pure anger. Jessica, that's exactly the kind of bullshit we were trying to avoid with the key person clause. We insisted on you specifically because we trusted you, and now they're treating you like this. I'm thinking about leaving, I said quietly. I can't work for a company that would do this to me. If you leave, we pull the contract, Robert said without hesitation. $50 million gone. They want to play games with your commission? Let's see how they like losing the biggest deal in their company's history. That afternoon, I walked into Marcus Wheeler's office without an appointment. His secretary tried to stop me, but I just kept walking. Marcus, we need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. He looked up from his computer, annoyed. Jessica, you can't just barge in here. Make an appointment with Linda. I just had coffee with Robert Kim from Pinnacle, I said, taking a seat across from his desk. He's not happy about the commission situation. Marcus's expression changed instantly. What do you mean? I mean he's threatening to pull the $50 million contract if I leave Morrison Tech. And after what you did to my commission, I'm definitely leaving. The color drained from Marcus's face. You can't be serious. Dead serious, I said, pulling out my phone. I can call him right now if you want. He's waiting for my decision. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, then picked up his phone. Patricia, get in here. Now. When Patricia walked in, Marcus explained the situation. I watched her face go through the same range of emotions that Robert's had. Disbelief, anger, then panic. The key person clause, she whispered. I forgot about the key person clause. Yeah, you did, I said. And now you have a choice. You can pay me the full commission I earned, or you can explain to the board why you lost $50 million over $250,000. The room was silent for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Marcus spoke. What do you want, Jessica? I want my full commission. $450,000, as originally calculated. And I wanted in writing that the commission structure won't be changed retroactively again. Done, Marcus said without hesitation. I'm not finished, I continued. I also want a promotion. Senior Vice President of Sales. I want my own team, my own budget, and complete autonomy over how I manage the Pinnacle account. Patricia started to object, but Marcus cut her off. Fine. What else? I want a new contract. 3 years guaranteed, with a severance package that protects me if you try to pull something like this again. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll have legal draw up the paperwork. One more thing, I said, standing up. I want Patricia's role overseeing the Pinnacle account transferred to me. Completely. She's proven she can't be trusted with decisions that affect my compensation. Patricia's face went bright red. You can't be serious. I'm deadly serious, I said. Those are my terms. Take them or lose the contract. Marcus looked at Patricia, then back at me. Done. The next week was a blur of paperwork, meetings, and very uncomfortable conversations. My new contract was everything I'd asked for and more. The promotion came with a base salary increase to $120,000, plus the restored commission structure. I got a corner office, a team of 3 junior sales associates, and complete control over the Pinnacle relationship. More importantly, I got respect. Word traveled fast through the company about what had happened. People started treating me differently. Not as the lucky rookie who'd stumbled into a big deal, but as someone who had real power and wasn't afraid to use it. Patricia Mills resigned 2 months later. She claimed it was for personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. She'd been outmaneuvered by someone she'd underestimated, and she couldn't handle the embarrassment. The Pinnacle implementation went flawlessly. Robert Kim and I worked together to roll out the new system across all 12 of their international offices. The project came in under budget and ahead of schedule, which led to additional contracts worth another $28 million over the next 2 years. My commission checks for those additional deals were calculated using the original structure. No caps, no retroactive changes, no games. Just honest compensation for honest work. Looking back, I realized that the key person clause wasn't just about protecting Pinnacle's interests. It was about protecting mine too. By insisting that I be their primary point of contact, they'd given me the leverage I needed to fight back when Morrison Tech tried to cheat me. The whole experience taught me something important about business. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Morrison Tech thought they could take advantage of me because I was young and relatively inexperienced. They thought I'd just accept their decision and move on. They were wrong. Today, I'm still at Morrison Tech, but everything has changed. I'm now the Senior Vice President of Sales, with a team of 12 people reporting to me. My annual compensation is in the high six figures, and I have equity in the company. More importantly, I have the respect of my colleagues and the trust of our biggest clients. The Pinnacle contract is set to renew next year, and Robert Kim has already indicated they want to expand the relationship even further. We're talking about potentially another $60 to $70 million in business over the next 3 years. And yes, there will be another key person clause. Some things are just too important to leave to chance. The funny thing is, Marcus Wheeler now introduces me at industry events as one of Morrison Tech's key strategic assets. He talks about how proud he is of the company's commitment to rewarding high performers and maintaining strong client relationships. I just smile and nod. We both know the truth about what really happened in that conference room 3 years ago. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting ahead. And that key person clause? It's still there, protecting both Pinnacle's interests and mine. Because the most important lesson I learned from this whole experience is that leverage isn't just about having power. It's about knowing how to use it. They tried to take advantage of me once. They'll never make that mistake again.